I got a little pop-up.
Yeah, looks like we're good.
Okay.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone.
Oh.
I'd like to call the meeting to order, and the first order of business is to approve the agenda. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion, Kevin.
Oh, Kevin, seconder. Glynis? All in favor? Carried. Okay, I guess my turn to do the land acknowledgement. So I've got to, I'll start off with, let me start the meeting off with that. Environmental Advisory and Review Committee meetings are held within the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. In a spirit of respect, reciprocity, and Treaty 7 territory, and oral practices of the Stoney Nakoda Nations, comprised of the Bearspaw First Nation, the Chiniki First Nation, and the Wesley First Nation, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, the Piikani, and Kainai peoples. We acknowledge this territory is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3 within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. We acknowledge all nations who live, work, and play and help us steward this land and honor and celebrate this territory. And we hope that the work of the committee is conducted with consideration for the historical and traditional values of our First Nation brethren. So I guess the second item of business is to assign that task to somebody else for the next meeting.
I could do it.
Was that Waverly?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have a great internet connection. Sorry.
Yeah, mine keeps saying
Off
it's
and on.
unstable as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
It might be my internet that's unstable.
Yeah, Bob, is that a standard wording that we use every month, or?
Good question.
I modified one that came off the town website. I just made it sort of more specific to our committee. So I think that was the intent, Amy, wasn't it, to just sort of freeform it a little bit?
Yep, kind of make it our own and make it relevant and meaningful. So yeah, definitely not going off a standard.
However, if we like what I just did, we can probably reuse that one if anybody wants to. That's fine as well.
Thanks.
No, that's great. Will that be shared in the minutes? I guess will that be put in the minutes to start with, I guess?
I can certainly send it to Caitlin for inclusion.
Yeah, and then we'll all have the same one. That'd
Yeah.
be great.
That's right. And if we can probably work on it, improve it as time goes on until we establish what we all agree to.
Great.
So yeah, I'll make sure that Caitlin gets that for the minutes. And I guess I jumped ahead and we approved the agenda already. So
Could I just ask, sorry, still on the topic of the land acknowledgement, if there is one that's sort of accepted by everyone, is everyone okay with some type of personalization at the beginning? I found that to be something that can be really meaningful.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think personal reflection makes it a lot more meaningful if you feel comfortable with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's not just a rote reading of something that's already established. I think some customization I think is kind of valuable. So has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting?
Yes.
So I'd ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the February 7th, 2022 meeting. Jeff, do we have a seconder?
Kevin?
All in
Yes.
favor? Show of hands. Okay, unfinished business. Caitlin.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to provide a bit of clarification around some of the comments that were made and questions that were asked at the last meeting. So the first item I wanted to provide some clarification around was a comment made by Councillor Jeff Ma, who mentioned a water security study being conducted by the town. And just for clarification, if you were to look at the budget, you would notice that it's actually a wellhead protection study. Is the name. So if you're looking for more information, that's how you'd find it. And this is a study to better delineate the wellhead protection area boundaries. and ensure groundwater protection in existing and new developments. And we're also doing an update to the utility master plan. So you won't find it under water security study. It's under wellhead protection study in the capital projects. And then regarding some of the questions that were asked, one question was, has there been any studies done on the signage and how effective it was? And this is the social norms campaign for the wildlife. Not to our knowledge. We've reached out to the town of Banff a couple times recently to set up a meeting to go over the social norms campaign for 2022. So once that meeting happens, and if there's any information that comes out of that, I will share it with the group. But as far as we know, there's been no studies done on the effectiveness of the signs. There was a question about how many signs there were for distribution. We believe there's roughly 7 or 8 signs. I have 5 of them currently in my office. One's with communication, and 2 of them are out for deployment in the Three Sisters area. So once the wet weather has sort of subsided, we'll put those signs out again this summer based on some of the comments that you provided at the last meeting and in consultation with the town of Banff to create to be consistent and to collaborate with them. So we have a similar message across the 2 towns. And then the next question, which I think we'll end up discussing a little bit later, but I'll just touch on it here, is can we spend a future meeting to have bylaw and the biosphere do a presentation on wildlife and wildlife management? And so we have had a few discussions, and we will be doing that at a future meeting. And also, I'm just going to hold off on any further comments on that right now until Bob and Gareth commented on later in the agenda. And then the last question is, what was the timeline of the third-party reviewer, and would we be able to address delays in the process to align with the third-party review for ERC? Speaking with planning, the third-party review is a bit of a back and forth between the applicant and the third-party reviewer. And then once they have a final EIS, it is about 2 to 3 weeks for the third party to review it. And so there really isn't a lengthy process there. And there isn't really the opportunity for ERC to conduct the review at the same time as a third party reviewer, as we want to ensure that ERC is reviewing the final document so that our comments from ERC and our comments from the third party reviewer aren't contradictory or are still relevant because they are of the complete and final EIS. And those were the questions and outstanding concerns from the last meeting that I want to address. So if there's no other comments, I think, Bob, you can move on to. Oh.
Yeah, thanks,
Waverly.
Caitlin. That's great information, and obviously stuff that we'll carry on with as we move forward and subsequent meetings. So we can move on to the updates, which is I guess we start off with Jeff. But before we start there, Gareth, I suggest that we can bring your topic from 550 into the roundtable updates, if that's okay with you, because I understand you'll be leaving us prior to the end of the meeting.
Apologies for that.
Okay.
Yes, that would be. Thank you.
Okay. So Jeff.
Well, council updates. Nothing too much crazy has really happened. Well, actually, that's not true. We had our big public hearing for LGMS CRPS, and we went through the whole thing, and we went from first, second to third reading within the day of the public hearing, which is pretty good. And so right now we are we've allowed the proponent to start taking their next steps of where they're at with their project and coming back forward with some more details. And we'll see what happens with that. There's a big push on that towards various affordable housing initiatives within that project. There's been a big push to see if there's some sort of capacity where, as they move forward with their next reveal of how they're going to do this, is there ways that we can set this up so the market housing component of that 120 units, which is 80, of those 80 units, how many of those can be set up so that there's some sort of stipulation, whether it's an employee housing stipulation or someone has to live in the valley, some sort of need to reside. And that's not typical of most development proposals that happen, but because Town of Canmore owns a very important little strip of land that's right in the middle of that project, that CRPS needs that land to fulfill the project, we have some leverage there to work with what's going on. So in a lot of ways, this could be a pretty exciting model project in terms of providing housing that is helpful for our community in all forms, not just the affordable housing piece, perhaps, you know, giving a little bit of leg up for folks that are local here and they're not in the sweet spot where they're able to, you know, be a part of, say, the Vital Home program, but at the same time, they can't compete at full market price from someone coming here from Toronto that has cashed out to buy. And so if we can find some ways to help them out, that'd be great. In terms of the environmental side of that project, we're still looking to see what they might come back with in terms of some environmental initiatives. There are other parts around there. For example, the Roundhouse daycare, that was actually, I think that's got some sort of geothermal sort of heating element. So, you know, there is like hope that this new project, as they go for the various buildings, maybe they can do some sort of interesting geothermal stuff, which works great on that scale, and those other pieces as well. And yeah, we're just fingers crossed, see what happens as we move forward with building codes. As you know, as Ms. Fournier has talked about, you know, the new national building codes coming down the pipe. So we'll see where those things are. With regards to the train, no news. So nothing there really. Supposedly there is some rumors of maybe some information decision piece coming down from the provincial government about possible next steps, but that's pretty blurry. And a lot of that's just like in the rumor mill phase. So who knows what's going on there. And yeah, I think that's kind of it for stuff that's tied towards this. And last piece, this is something you guys at ERC worked on before my time at council. This was the palliative care stuff. And the proponent there still has not kind of taken it to the next step where they're bringing it to public hearing. So that is sort of sitting on the shelf right now for whatever reasons that might be. Cool. If any questions, let me know. Sir, Gareth.
Great work, Councillor Ma. Thanks for that.
I don't know if I did anything there. I did a recap.
So, and one thing that I kind of wish that I had leaned into this ASP a little bit harder. And so this is a question after the fact, but as an environmental educator, I'm actually, you know, there is and given that this is on school grounds, the axe that I would have ground if I'd had my act together and gone to the darn hearing is like, hey, to what degree can we install geothermal, as you mentioned, in this new housing, and do other kind of energy efficiency, low carbon initiatives on the housing, and quite possibly share some of that approach and learning with the kids who are just next door in the school. So is there any leverage? Does the town have any leverage to kind of invoke that at this point, or is that horse left the barn? You did mention the possibility of upcoming geothermal, and wait and see, fingers crossed. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, it's kind of like one of those things. Like this Fournier probably might hop in a little bit later on. With the building code side of piece, we can't push it hard in that sort of way. You know, like they have like 8 buildings that they have to build. And so depending how quick that turnaround time is to build those 8 buildings, some of those codes might be coming in by that point as well. Like the proponent knows we would love to see that, like that piece. But I think as far as saying like a hard, like you definitely have to do this sort of thing, I don't think that is totally in our jurisdiction to push that hard. Like as say for like Waverly's piece on say electric vehicles, I know she did a presentation on EVs, you know, the question was asked like, hey, you got these 120 units coming in, what is the scoop? Like, will this be set up for EV charging? And they're saying that it's going to be set up in such a way so that if EV does need to go in, it's set up readily enough that the unit can like upgrade to that, as opposed to some crazy workaround. So they do have that stuff on their radar, and they are motivated towards it. And I think at the end of the day, they're still trying to juggle the piece of making enough funding for their endowment fund.
Yeah.
And so we're all in that sort of piece where they're probably sharpening their pencils and looking at all these pieces and looking at all those things, and we'll see where we're at. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
But yeah, grind that axe to that next public hearing, man. We'd love to see it. It'd be awesome. Okay. Dennis.
Yeah, I was just wondering if that same logic applies to energy labeling, since that's not a huge outlay, but could raise awareness and whatnot, at least for the PAH housing. Might be a start if they were required to complete the energy labeling process.
Could you elaborate more on that when you say the energy labeling process?
So there's a Canadian program where you can do an energy audit on an existing house or on a new build house and provide there's standardized labeling and there is thought around for the National Building Code that it will become a requirement, possibly even to buy or sell a house, that there would have to be energy labeling attached. But it seems like something that is relatively minor cost, and we might be able to have enough leverage to request or require that.
Okay.
I don't know if Amy has additional or Caitlin has additional thoughts about that. But.
Yeah, I can just quickly say, as far as I know, we can't legally require it from the town perspective, and that's what's holding up benchmarking or energy labeling for a lot of communities is that lack of jurisdictional ability. But yeah, hopefully the new code will require that, or there's other kind of moves afoot to try to get that to happen. The one good thing that we do have is that we likely have the data for different buildings because of our green building regulation program. So as part of that program, and we'll talk a little bit about that more later on, but there's modeling or an EnerGuide assessment for new homes or kind of modeling for the larger buildings that has to be done. So we should actually have the foundational data. It's just a matter of how that is, whether or not we can require that to be displayed or made public.
Yeah. And this is an aside from the CRPS development. The solar program for Town of Canmore is still going on. I think we've got 7 more spots available for applicants. So if you're looking to do a solar installation on your home, I believe it's like a $1,250 credit. So that's not bad. If you have that in your budget to do it, check it out. And
The application's in.
Hey, are you the first one? Are you the 1 out of 8 that we're talking about, Bob? Or you're like number 2?
I must be.
Okay. Well, excellent. Right on.
Jeff, is there a deadline for a submission of such applications? I did mine years back for others.
I think maybe Amy might have the most sharpest timeline on this because I just saw a report the other day, but I can't remember the exact date. But I think like the deadline's kind of coming up.
Right, muted. Jeff stole my thunder.
Sorry.
That's all good. It's all good. But okay, I have updated numbers because those council reports are a bit dated by the time you guys get them. So as of right now, we have 16 applicants for 7 available incentives. The application deadline is March 25th. So we only have budget for 7 this year. And yeah, as many people can apply as they want. And then what we're going to do is March 25th is a Friday. That's when we need them all in. On Monday, we're going to do an old school lottery, pull numbers out of a hat. And the first 7 get them. Or the chosen 7. And then we'll have some waitlisted in case people, that has happened in the past where people have been unable to proceed. And so we go to the next person.
Just a question about grants as well. So I started thinking about this, Jeff, when you were talking about that development and the possibility of, geothermal EV charging and so on. But then this also ties to the solar. It's just like, I'm sure we all know there's fairly large federal funding available for things like, different sort of renewable energy projects, EV charging, solar. And that one would be specifically, I'd wonder if you advise people who might not be able to get that program or just to double up if they can go for the Green Homes Grant, because that one's 5,000 or up to 5,000, I think. But in the case of development, are there any existing examples of like collaboration on grants with the town or just like advice from the town to proponents?
Amy?
There typically isn't a lot of grants available for private sector building. So I do get interested developers and property owners asking this because they want to do it. And they're like, is there any money? And usually my answer is no. There's often not a lot of money for private sector. The most recent thing that was available was from the province through Energy or Emissions Reduction Alberta has an energy savings program for business. So in some cases there is their solar component got kind of eaten up right away. So they're no longer offering that. So when there is, we try to let people know about them. We let people know through economic development. We do also comment on pre-application and development permits. And so if there were grants, we would let people know. But like I said, private sector, there's often not. With the federal Greener Homes program, I believe that's why we have so much interest in our solar incentive this year, because people are stacking it. And that's totally allowed, and we encourage that. And on the application form, we actually make a little note that says, it's more of a question, but are you planning to use it? Because I'm trying to gather data of how helpful this is. And I would say all except one are planning or have either already applied to Greener Homes or are planning to apply to Greener Homes to get that $5,000. Does that fully answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Did you apply for the Greener Homes, Bob?
Yeah, I did, and it took 4 months to get it approved. They're a bunch of doughheads at that website, because you have to submit your property tax notice, and of course the property tax notice comes to my wife, so the address has my wife's name and our address. Then below it has the owners, which are both of us. And they kept kicking back our application, saying it didn't match the application. And I finally had to rescan the property tax notice with a big belt marker circling the owners before, and then it was approved the same day. But it took me 4 months to get that through their heads that it was actually a proper document that I was submitting.
Yeah,
But
I think that's pretty typical.
We're scheduled for the spring. Yeah, we're scheduled for the spring now. So
that's awesome. Sorry, I just noticed something. Caitlin, like Ken had joined momentarily, but I don't see him on the participant list anymore. So I don't know. Did he pop in? Did you guys see Ken pop in?
He was here.
He was here, yeah. And now he seems to be gone. Okay. Keep an eye out for him if he's like trying to get back in. But yeah, the grant thing is super challenging, because often these programs come in and we'd like to promote them, but we also have to acknowledge that the barriers to entry can be quite high. And there's lag times, and they don't always match up with timelines. So it can be a bit challenging even to promote them, because I'm like, I'm going to promote this, but I know it's going to take 6 months and people are going to have to pull their hair out to get this grant. So yeah, it's a challenge.
He's Greener Homes for new or existing residential?
I believe it's just for existing.
Yeah, retrofits.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is that a lot of these developers are looking for grants to help them out with new, and most programs, there are some exceptions, but most programs are targeted to retrofit.
Yeah, I guess I was specifically wondering if, and I don't know the answer for municipal applications, but there's the Smart Renewables and Electrification Pathways program. So I was wondering if something like that geothermal installation would count, but there's a minimum something joule requirement, and I don't know what it corresponds with in real life. Yeah.
But I would say if you find out about stuff like that, just fire it. And even if you've heard about it before, it's good to be reminded, because there's always something new coming up. So, we can try to link people. So do please pass those types of things along.
Okay, do we want to just do a roundtable on anybody else has some updates they want to provide? Now that Jeff's given us his, I can probably go ahead, and then maybe Gareth, you can feed into it. Following our last meeting, Gareth and I got together to discuss the wildlife issues, both the fruit trees and the off-leash dogs. And he's been busy in the background rallying his troops and tracking down some research, as of course anything we need to do or any recommendations we can make or should make should be evidence-based. And he started to collect a few things along the way with regards to that. And maybe I'll just pass it off to you, Gareth, and you can take it forward.
Well, sure. Just, I mean, so it's stuff that's freshly in, and I shared it with Caitlin and Bob and a couple of my staff, and just the interesting. So the story that I told actually to Bob is when I sat in the seat that Jeff Ma is currently sitting back in '94 or something like that, and the Silvertip development was going in. I was this green counselor. I'm like, okay, so Dr. Paul Paquette, the biologist in charge, what are you going to do regarding off-leash dogs in the wildlife corridor? And Paul, quite to my surprise, said, well, there's no evidence to show that off-leash dogs have any impact on wildlife, and so we're not going to do a lot. And that was a science guy saying there's no evidence. So and so I told that to Bob, and I also told Bob that like that didn't resonate. It still doesn't resonate. And so I went to John Paskowski, who's the ecologist with Alberta Parks, and also somebody called Hillary Young that Jeff Ma knows a little bit, and asked them for their, hey, in the last 30 years, has anything changed on this front? And sure enough, it has. And so I sent a package to Bob, and I'll send it to anyone else who wants, if you'd like, that talks about that shows the evidence. And it's complex. My predecessor, Cheryl Hodjanowski, did some really great work for her PhD dissertation around this, showing that, long story short, and I don't want, there's a ton of good work out there. So I don't want to minimize it by just trying to capture in a sentence the complexity that's there. But as a bullet, I will say that Paul's contention back then that there was no science is no longer relevant. There is some science to show that dogs, and also hikers, but certainly dogs who are random and kind of do all kinds of weird things in wildlands, can impact the behavior of certain wildlife in the corridors. They don't know as much as they wish they did about wolves and grizzly bears, because funny enough, well, with everything else that's happened, we don't have a ton of wolves and grizzly bears in this area anyway, so there's not much of a data set there to anyway. So that's a little bit of work, and we can, and staff and I will do a deeper dive as we try and take our own evidence-based approach, right, to this interesting challenge of wildlife management. And so connected with that, and so I have to apologize, I don't have as much time as I wished today. I have to sort of wink out of here in just 10 minutes from this meeting to go to another one. So my question is, and I'm very happy to meet the needs of this group with a presentation or something next month, and happy to do that, and I suppose if there's any more detail that I can use to sharpen our approach and figure out who to bring or what to say, indeed, I'd love to hear more.
Well, Garrett, I didn't have a chance to go through everything you sent today, but I think we will circulate it all to the committee for their review, and I think it's a tremendous start. I think from the conversation we had a week and a half ago to where we're all already here at this point. I think we're moving faster on this this topic than I thought we were going to, based on your initial thoughts. And I'm quite excited about what you've supplied, but there's still a lot of reading to do. There's that 64-page PhD dissertation or thesis that we'll have to wade through as well. So, but interesting stuff to start with. So I'm pretty excited about that. The other thing I think we want to make sure that maybe we can tackle it somewhat in parallel would be the fruit tree issues, because obviously it's both. They're both concerning in the valley, and Gareth and I both talked about, which one is more likely that we can tackle on the short term and get some action maybe even this year before the fruit tree season starts. That might be the place to go. But based on the information that Gareth supplied today, it may be that we can tackle these both very effectively in reasonably short periods of time.
Yeah, and Bob, so let me understand that in a sentence, just so we, I'm happy to do that, and Nick DeRuyter is our lead for WildSmart and has done a whole lot of great work on this notion of helping the town of Canmore, or indeed private residents, deal with the fruit that is otherwise a bear attraction. So help me understand the goal. Like, so where are we going here? And what are we feeding into? What's the goal of having WildSmart and Biosphere Institute present to EARC? I'm happy to do it, but it's a better presentation if I understand better where this might head.
Yeah, well, at least from my point of view, I think our role is an advisory role to council, and I think my goal here is to collect enough information to present to council perhaps some solutions to both of these issues, and give them put the onus on them to maybe take some action to address this in a more meaningful way than has been done in the past.
Can I just ask the councillor on the phone, does that resonate, Jeff?
Yeah, like I think what happens is last year, things were a little quirky with how many bears we had in town from fruit stuff, and I think more presentations and information to help, and also solutions would be super helpful. I saw Miss Caitlin there had her hand up as well, so I was curious what she wanted to say.
Thanks, Councillor Ma. I just wanted to comment that I think there would be value in Gareth and you or your staff providing a presentation almost a little bit more broadly, as well as to kind of what programs does the Biosphere offer to help with that human wildlife conflict interaction, because we were also hoping to bring in someone from our bylaw enforcement area on how they interact and what their role is with wildlife management, because there is a delineation between town bylaw and Alberta Environment and Parks. And then the Biosphere does a lot of the, and I'm also new, so I'm keen to learn this as well, a lot of the education through the WildSmart program and a lot of research into the sciences into that coexisting. And so I think there'd be value in just having kind of like an information sharing session of what do you know? What research are you basing your decisions and your programs off of? And how do your programs operate? And where is that overlap in that area or potential for the town and the Biosphere to be collaborating more and singing from the same songbook and all that fun stuff, right? So that was sort of my hopes that we could get from that conversation. And if the fruit trees and the off-leash dogs are the biggest areas of concern, we could focus a bit more in on those. But if there's other things that maybe we're narrow in that we're thinking those are the biggest issues and they're not the biggest issues. So if you have any research or programming that we could help support, or you could help support us as well. The town does offer a fruit tree incentive program. And so I think there's opportunities. There's not a big uptake on it from my understanding. So there's opportunities for this group and the Biosphere to maybe bolster that program a bit as well. So.
Hey, Caitlin, I know you're relatively new to the gig. What is the parameters for the fruit tree program this upcoming year? Like, I know in the past, like when I was at where I used to live before, we applied for it and we got like a tree reimbursed for taking out like another tree. Is that budget limited, or I was just curious where that's sitting for this upcoming year, if those numbers are available?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to say what I understand at this point, and then Amy can correct me. We're hoping to kind of kick it off this spring, and from my understanding in the past, it's been up to $300 for the removal of a fruit tree based on if you submit your invoice from the contractor that you had to come in and remove your fruit tree. So it's not a replacement program, it's simply a removal of the fruit tree program, the current fruit tree on your property. And up to $300. So Amy, I don't know if there's anything I kind of missed.
Nope, that's, yeah, You got it. It's the intent is to support people who need to hire a contractor or an arborist to remove the tree. So that's some help, and it's 50%. Almost everybody comes within that amount. It's very rare that removal of trees, fruit trees anyways, are costing more than $600. So that $300 is covering the half of the price for that removal, and then nothing for replacement trees.
Okay.
And it's budgeted, so it's usually about, I think I want to say about $3,500 a year, but we've never had an instance where we're oversubscribed. We've always been under that, so we haven't had to do a lottery or select people on a first come first basis. So for this year, I think, and this is to be determined, but it would likely be on a first come first served basis, assuming that again we wouldn't reach the cap. And we do have some priority zones delineated, so we'll try to focus on those areas first. So it's the ones you would expect: the Three Sisters, Rundle View, and then on the other side as well. So if we did get into an instance where we had to select and we were nearing the budget, we would be based on those priority zones.
I also go ahead, Gary.
Just to, I mean, thanks to Caitlin for kind of pulling us out a bit. And when you pull out just ever so slightly, even from kind of the details of like the dog camp, off leash dog campaign, or indeed the fruit tree issue, you all of a sudden there's complexity, and so I just dropped it. I can never fully articulate the name of this group because it's about a paragraph. It takes a while to say, but the Bow Valley Human Wildlife Coexistence Roundtable, and they have a technical working group that works for them. So Hillary and I both, well, first of all, that's a group that deals with this sort of thing, was struck up after the death of a problematic female bear who, and we just, a couple of years ago, folk in town decided that was not acceptable, and so that there's the roundtable is a bunch of the political level, and then below that there's a technical group, which is people like Hillary Young, Jeff's partner, and I. Hillary works with the Y2Y. There's a biosphere representative, and the whole bunch extra on the technical level dealing with this. So it's another, and I mention it because I'm given to understand that this roundtable is in the process of being resurrected by the province, which I absolutely support. And we're going to meet with Rob, who's driving this in just a few days here. So may I propose, if it works, Mr. Chair, because you want to get it right. Like, I'm not sure if the right way to go here is I can certainly come and talk about the little things that we've talked about. We could also, there's other kind of interesting scope and other context that we could bring in, and as has been suggested, the notion of talking about the role of the town of Kenmore, the role of enforcement by the province of Alberta, and other pieces, like there's complexity in that ecosystem. So if you want, Bob, you and I and possibly Caitlin could pull this offline and just sort of figure out what serves the committee the best, if you'd like. Or I can just charge ahead and do this one-shot deal in April, but it might create more questions.
Yeah, no, I think this is important enough that we need to do this right. So I'm more than happy to create a little bit of a subcommittee to make sure that what we do is not just blow smoke. I want to make whatever we find out, or whatever recommendations we can come up with the results of all these studies and stuff is to make an impact, and, not just sit there and talk about it for the next couple of years.
Can I just jump in there, Bob, as well? On that note, with the April meeting, there's limited dates of availability with Gareth and administration, and the only day that we're finding that there is an overlap would be April 4th, which is quite soon. So that's 3 weeks from today. So perhaps because of this conversation and wanting to bring in kind of a larger context and really do it right and have kind of a subgroup meeting in advance of that, would there be value in pushing, I know this is later on the agenda, but I want to capture Gareth while he's here, pushing that meeting until May?
Yeah, I'm up for that. We just also have to be aware that we typically do not meet in the summer, so we do
Okay.
have a fairly limited number of meetings per year. Although, if everybody's in favor, we could maybe extend it to maybe 1 or 2 meetings in, July, if need be. I just don't want to lose momentum on this, and hopefully we can have something done. Like again, with if we're trying to do something for this year's fruit season, it might mean that we'll have to ask people to meet in addition for an additional month. That's okay with everybody. Great.
Sounds good.
That sounds good. Hey, Caitlin and Bob, why don't you and I talk, at least the 3 of us, arrange a little conversation. And if there's other that wish to join the subcommittee, I'm happy to do that. And let's just meet sometime in the next few weeks if folks are willing.
Sounds good.
I do apologize, folks. I got to get out of here, and lovely to see everyone's face today. Happy to plow into this.
Thanks for the update, Gareth.
Gareth.
Thanks.
Hey, Gareth.
Okay, any more roundtable updates from anybody, or are we okay to move on?
A brief one. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Jenna.
I had circulated notice through the Kenmore Museum of a session on environmental stewardship with the led by the Snow family from the Stoney Nakoda, and I just wanted to report that I did participate in that. There wasn't that much content that I would think of in the Western perspective as being directly environmental stewardship, as we've probably come to think about it. But it was a good step towards reconciliation and dialogue. So from that point of view, it was worthwhile. And I don't know if the rest of the committee wants to see notices like that, or if you were already aware of it, but I'm happy to forward if there's anything else in that series or similar sessions. I'll pass them along.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Mine also has to do with the session, so it was a good segue. I was invited by the Bow Valley Climate Action Society to sit on a panel last week to do with getting communities and businesses ready for an EV future, or very present, really. So I was there. I mean, I'm a planner, but I'm not a municipal planner. So I was there really as an EV owner and climate activist. And there were some takeaways from that I thought were really interesting. There was ATCO, Fortis, and a few other people, the City of Calgary, and then a BC Clean Energy Association that were there. So the recording is available on the Bow Valley Climate Action Society Facebook page. If anyone was interested, there were quite a few municipal attendees of that one.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Waverly. I also I was on that webinar, and you did a great job, by the way. I thought that was very good, and really good introduction to EVs. Not knowing a lot, but interested in as the price of gas goes up, interested in maybe someday purchasing an EV. And it was interesting too, because our condo building in Three Sisters is less than 2 years old, and we have probably almost 100 parking spaces in the garage. We have one 110 plug.
Mm-hmm.
So, it really shows we've got a problem here. And actually, I'm on the board of our condo, and tomorrow night we have our monthly Zoom meeting, and I'm going to bring it up in terms of, participating in your webinar, and what can we do, or what should we do when the next person or the first person applies to the board for an EV charger in the garage, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a real issue, and so I really appreciate the opportunity of having taken part in that. It's great.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And I'd be happy to talk about that more if you wanted any suggestions. I'm the chair of my condo board, and I was a bit of the EV squeaky wheel, and there's another
good for
one
you.
coming now.
Good for you.
So we've been looking at a couple of solutions, and having a charger at each person's spot isn't necessarily the easiest. So yeah, we've looked at a couple. I have quotes from Flow, which is a charging company. I'd be happy to chat offline about it if you want.
That'd be great sometime. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, just reach out. Thanks.
Sorry, that's it for me.
Just as an aside, my wife and I are in the process of buying a new vehicle, and one of the ones we were looking at was a plug-in hybrid RAV4.
Right.
And it's a 3 to 4 year waiting list, unless you live in Ontario or BC, because BC and Ontario have the rebates program. So we ended up with a hybrid, just a standard hybrid, which is still going to take 8 months to get here.
Really?
Oh my God. I was able to get mine. It was the dealer demo at the end of the year last year. And I was at Hyundai on the weekend, and they had EVs on the floor that are going to be demo models in the fall. So that is usually an option.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, with my solar installation, I was given an option to install a plug-in as well as part of that installation. So that's another maybe an option. Is I'm not sure how condos will work with solar panels, but if you're planning a solar installation with your condos, then you could probably arrange for those plugins to be installed at the same time.
Oh, the Greener Homes grant would cover that?
Well, you get $5,000 from the Greener Homes grant, so it's not going to cover the whole thing anyway. So it would just be an add-on, probably, that you probably have to pay for yourself. But like my installation right now with panels is $20,000, and if I wanted to put a plug in, they would charge another $1,500. But they just probably save the cost of mobilization, or the cost of installing it separately would probably be more than they're already up on site doing it. They're already playing with the panel.
Yeah,
just a consideration. Okay, I guess we can move on to the next item, which is the continuation of the discussion of the ERC's role with the town. And I believe there's a bit of a PowerPoint to guide us through that.
Yeah, that's correct. So just bear with me here. I'll get it set up and share my screen. Sorry about that.
Just to add to that comment while we're waiting, Waverly, I was on that call as well, and great job, like Kevin said. And I guess a good primer on the EV situation. But Glynis, I think you shared that link, and I'm looking forward to the next one, which is on the homes. So that's coming up, I guess, later this month. So.
Yeah, I registered for that one as well. It looked really interesting. I know one of the organizations there, but not necessarily everyone else.
Yeah, so thank you.
Thanks, Ralph, for filling that dead space for me. The awkward moment of trying to navigate your screens. So I hope that everyone can see my PowerPoint slide that's up here. Perfect, thanks. So Amy and I thought there'd be value in sort of putting a bit of a slideshow presentation together, very informal, very brief, to kind of focus the discussion moving forward after the conversation that we had at the last meeting on February 7th. So I'll just move through some slides. If you do have any questions, just raise your hand, or we'll definitely open it up for questions at the end if you want to save it to the end. So just a quick overview of what we'll talk about in the presentation is the current role of ERC, then the proposed EIS bylaw changes, and then we have some comments on kind of each section of the changes that were requested. And then we'll move into a bit of a conclusion, next steps from administration, and then some potential future focus areas for ERC. So just to provide a refresher, I know a lot of you, you just went over this, I think in December or September, whenever you were elected to ERC, but this is what is stated in the ERC bylaw as the role of ERC. And so you can see to review and advise completeness and adherence to the terms of reference for the EIS, or the, yes, reference for the environmental impact statement, advise on the terms of reference, advise on protective management measures and mitigative measures that may be needed for specific environmental policy areas, review and advise on environmental impact assessments, which is different than the impact statement, advise the town's environmental sustainability action plan. We kind of touched on this last week. So this is the plan that was done in 2010, which guides the environmental actions for the town. And then upon request of the Development Authority, advise the Development Authority on environmental impact statements and environmental impact assessment statements as required by the Canmore Municipal Development Plan, and perform duties as directed by council from time to time. So just a quick refresher, just so we're all on the same page of what ERC's role is. So it's a good starting point for the conversation. So prior to me starting with the town, I understand that there was some changes requested by ERC for the EIS policy and the ERC bylaw relating to climate change, primarily extending the review and traditional ecological knowledge. And so we do understand the reason for the changes and fundamentally agree that a greater focus on climate change from all levels of government is extremely valuable and important to see. However, we're not entirely sure if the EIS policy is the best tool within our regulatory framework to address these changes. So Amy's going to go over the next couple of slides where she breaks down where we're currently incorporating mitigation and adaptation measures, and we believe are better suited to address these issues. So we want to go through those with you first, so you can see how it's currently being captured, and then we can open the discussion back up at the end. But I will hand it over to Amy to start that review.
Thanks, Caitlin. So, you know, in response to the requested changes, we've been having conversations internally, but also I've been doing a lot of research to figure out like how it would be done, but then backing that up to saying, okay, well, how is it already being done? And the approach with the EIS, how would that compare and fit in with how climate change mitigation is already being brought up in the development process. So I just wanted to go through that with you guys because I don't know if we ever have to the kind of holistic degree that we should have. And also just so you guys have the bigger picture, because I know that the focus of ERC has been so strongly on the EIS aspect, and then kind of more piecemeal, in my experience anyways, kind of more piecemeal when Lori and I would bring something to you guys for review and input, but never having like the complete picture. So some of the things that we already do is the sustainability screening report. So I'm not sure if everybody's really familiar with this, but what the sustainability screening report is, actually, Caitlin, do you mind advancing? Because this is the one that has the table, right? Yeah, so I wanted to put a side-by-side comparison about what the sustainability screening report is and the EIS terms of reference, and how they are the same and differ. So the sustainability screening report was put in place a few years ago. It was before my time, so I don't know the exact start date, but it came out of a lot of the natural step work that the town had previously done, and the environmental sustainability action plan. And what it is an attempt to quantify the overall benefits of a proposed project versus its impact. So it's actually a numeric score that is given to a project, and a proponent will have to go through, it's basically an Excel spreadsheet, and identify all of, or numerous different impacts. And within that, is a quantification of greenhouse gas emissions. So part of this report is to model or estimate, probably is a better word, the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that would be generated by a project. And this goes into the spreadsheet along with other aspects, such as the waste generated. So on the impact side, and then on the other side, trying to figure out what the social benefit might be. So if it's job creation, the project with the palliative care was a good example. So that scored high on the social fabric side because of what it was providing. So anyways, at the end of it, they get the score to try to determine whether the net benefit outweighs the negative impact. And that is used by planning. That is also, I don't know if you've seen it in the last few RMO, Rocky Mountain Outlook articles about planning developments. The Planning Commission refers to it as well. So this one is actually required for any development over 500 square meters. So, I mean, so it wouldn't be a single home, but once you're getting into kind of multifamily developments and commercial developments, this is required. And so I just really wanted to note that what we're trying to get at with the EIS of understanding climate change impacts or contribution to global climate change, this is actually already part of an existing process with the sustainability screening report that is kind of more inclusive of development as opposed to the EIS, which is only triggered in certain instances. Caitlin, do you mind going back? Thank you. So that's a quantification effort. And then I mentioned this earlier, but the green building regulation. So the green building regulation is something we have. It's actually more of a financial penalty incentive based approach. And so what it means is that a developer will, or a proponent will pay a security that's based on the total value of their property as a percentage. And if they meet the threshold or the target of 10% better than EnerGuide reference house, so those are for kind of single family developments, or exceed the National Energy Code for building, the current one, they would get that back. And if they kind of hit higher levels, they actually get more back of that security. And if they don't, they forfeit the security or they get kind of a lower percentage back. So that's an attempt to kind of go beyond. So understanding the greenhouse gas emissions, but then actually doing something to mitigate them. So that's when I was referring to earlier that we actually do have some modeling data that we could put towards building labeling if that legislation came through from a kind of higher levels of government. So they do, through that program, also understand what the energy modeling and the outlay in the greenhouse gas emission production would be. And also, they mentioned this kind of earlier as well, but there is a process that developers can go through, and one of them is called a pre-application. So they can actually arrange a meeting with the town and different staff from different departments prior to going too far down the road of their development to understand what kind of requirements are in place and meeting, and it's mostly to do with the land use bylaw and engineering design guidelines to make sure that they're anticipating what will be required of them. So we have this meeting, they submit their kind of early plans, and then staff from different departments provide the comments of how well that would meet the land use bylaw or engineering design guidelines and what might need to be done, and we can flag things for them. So Caitlin and I participate in this process, and so we actually review all these applications and then provide comment. And in that process, we actually can provide specific mitigation suggestions. So, you know, this is the struggle that we've always had, is that we don't have the legislative authority to require above and beyond building code or require people to put EV chargers in their garages, but at this stage we can recommend. So basically what we do is recommend the key things. So quite often they sound very similar. So we're recommending more of a passive building approach. We're recommending people invest in renewable energy at the time because it will save them money later on. I usually pitch this as energy costs are rising. We have increase in carbon tax. Please do your business case analysis and pro formas based on future energy prices, not current, to make sure that you are understanding the full picture of what kind of savings you could be facing. We usually talk about transportation issues. So a whole bunch of GHG mitigation advice that we provide, as well as in the development permit. So when they get farther down, we provide those comments again and note where things could be improved. This also goes, we try to integrate climate change adaptation suggestions as well, where we can, reminding landscape guidelines not to plant fruit trees, things like that. So this is kind of like a direct opportunity to provide that kind of information. And I bring this up because one of the things that with the EIS was talking about mitigation strategies. So we actually advise on them as opposed to getting them to do that as part of the EIS. This is kind of a across the board thing that is done. And then of course we have the engineering design guidelines. So they're less specific on the kind of building code aspect because we're not supposed to go above and beyond code, but where the engineering design guidelines are quite effective and really prescriptive is more to do with cycling and active transportation. So really ensuring cycling route connectivity and limiting vehicle parking, and as well making sure that waste rooms are sized appropriately for future food waste collection. And Councillor Mott talked about this already, but we do also have the upcoming National Model Energy Code. I can't promise anything right now because we still haven't seen it, but the federal government has signaled that this is the tool that will help us achieve net zero energy ready homes by 2030. So we have high hopes that this will be an effective code, but we don't know yet. So hopefully by having this code, a lot of this will potentially be solved for us, because if the requirement is to have net zero energy ready homes, then a lot of what we're trying to get to will be achieved by this. Do you mind going forward? And I think we're good here. And then also climate change adaptation. So there is some areas where this is already considered in development. So one of the big ones is stormwater management. And within the design guidelines and within all applications, and this is a big part of the pre-application and development permit process, is the requirement to contain on-site flows from a 1 in 100 year storm. So that is embedded already into the process. And we have been in touch with engineering about this, and we actually use, it's Calgary-based data. So the 1 in 100 year storm is based on Calgary data. And that for us is actually conservative, or kind of gives us a bit of a buffer, because those prairie storms tend to be higher intensity in short bursts than what we actually see here in the mountains. So we're pretty confident that that is being fairly proactive in trying to manage that kind of stormwater impacts from a changing climate. A big one that's part of this too is steep creek flood risk zones. We have zones delineated in town where development cannot occur, what kind of caveats go with it, depending on where they are based on steep creek flooding. And just an example is just like higher slab height in certain areas. So we, in the valley bottom, there's some overland flooding risk. There's slab height requirements, there's rain garden requirements, there's aspects to try to manage that. Developments of a certain size are required to do stormwater management plan. And we do also, as I mentioned, in that process, so Caitlin and I provide kind of some prescriptive advice around extreme heat and cold events, wildfire smoke. We're trying to link it with greenhouse gas mitigation to achieve both. So it's the idea of low carbon resilience. So passive house design, for example, also helps people reduce energy, but at the same time is more resilient to extreme heat and cold events. As well, passive house design, which we encourage, you can get, because it's mechanical ventilation, you can get filters that help to filter out wildfire smoke in the event of a wild. So we're really pushing this type of development. We are looking in the TP Town, or it's, I should have said ARP, not ASP, but looking at the appropriate intensity, frequency, duration curves and what registered concentration pathway we should be looking at as a town. So this kind of is underway in a current ARP. And if you guys, I don't know if you're familiar with RCPs, but it's essentially how hopeful are we in limiting climate change. So the higher number is 8.5. Like, so are we anticipating a future of 8.5 degrees of warming? So if that's our assumption, we're actually trying to account for catastrophic climate change, whereas some cities may be looking at lower numbers. So they're more hopeful about our ability to limit climate warming. But it makes a big difference on the anticipated outcomes and how we are preparing. I talked about the Calgary storm projections. There's also the Fire Smart guidelines, and there's some Fire Smart and wildfire protection or fire proofing, I guess, materials in the land use bylaw as well that are embedded in there to try to mitigate against potential wildfire or impacts to development from wildfires. We also are looking at updating our climate change adaptation and resilience plan that we have from 2016. And some folks in engineering would love to see an update to the stormwater master plan. And that would be where climate adaptation would be embedded into that. So that's some of the stuff that's also happening from the climate adaptation perspective. Caitlin, I think you can probably.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Amy. So that was a great overview of two of the kind of areas that ERC was hoping to address with the EIS policy changes. And the other one, other area of change was extending the review timeline. And so it was, when presenting this through to planning and to our general manager, Whitney, who you met last month, there was no appetite to extend the timeline for the EIS review for ERC. Currently, the timeline for the third-party reviewer sits around 2 to 3 weeks once the, as I mentioned this earlier, once the EIS is finalized. And the ERC review must occur after the third-party reviewer review occurs. So extending that by 60 days or 2 months would be quite, it would raise a lot of red flags, I guess, within the development community and the review process. And so there is no desire at this point to do that. So I'll just kind of leave that at that. And the next thing was incorporating traditional ecological knowledge into the EIS policy. And so Whitney touched on this at this time, that the relationship with our neighboring nations isn't at the point where we can effectively incorporate traditional ecological or the requirement for traditional ecological knowledge and have the resources and the ability to do a comprehensive review to ensure that that's correct, because we don't have those relationships built yet. We want to be respectful and put the time in to build those relationships properly before asking things of that relationship. And so around the bylaw, there was the request to incorporate, and this is the ERC bylaw, apologies, of incorporating input into the terms of reference and to the quality of the EIS. And so the notes that I had been reviewing was that based on the form that ERC currently completes when they review an EIS, there is the opportunity to provide comments. So this is the opportunity that ERC currently has where they provide feedback on the quality of the EIS, and that council takes those into consideration. So we feel that at this point, opening the bylaw to these edits just kind of puts the bylaw at risk, considering the edits are quite minor. And so we think that the current process is actually quite effective and captures what you're asking for in the edits to the bylaw. And I'll speak to that a little bit more. And so the reason, I guess, we're proposing that it might not be appropriate to incorporate the edits that ERC has requested into the bylaw and the EIS policy is that there's the current climate around development within the municipality and the kind of the legal context and that we're being challenged on right now is the town overstepping its authority to demand things of developers outside of the MGA and outside of the building code. And so we're trying to be quite respectful that if we push the EIS policy and the ERC bylaw to extend into that area where we don't currently have legal authority to be asking, that we're putting the entire process at risk. So by opening the EIS policy to make some of the edits that ERC has requested, we then will have to open it up to consultation with the development community, with the public, which may put the entire EIS process at risk because it's currently not a legislated thing for municipalities to be asking for it. The town of Canmore has been asking for this for several years. It's kind of grandfathered in. It's a process that's still quite progressive within Alberta, and not a lot of municipalities are asking for these EIS reviews. And so we feel that because we're capturing a lot of the climate change information that you're looking for in other tools, such as the sustainability screening report, within our land use bylaw, within our engineering guidelines, that the risk to the value that the EIS currently provides in terms of that biophysical review, we could lose it altogether, or could substantially soften it so that it doesn't have the effect that it currently has. And that is the concern from administration's point of opening the EIS policy to include those aspects at this point. And so we are recommending that we table those edits for now, that this is not the time to bring it forward. And we're hoping that ERC can agree to table those edits for now, and that we're proposing that we maintain the current process. We won't expand it for the EIS, but then we will look at what's ERC's as a group's current expertise, and maybe provide some, and where ERC can provide some expertise and advice to council on those key focus areas that you currently have the background in. And so we can identify some areas for 2022 based on your individual backgrounds that we could support council on. And so we wanted to highlight that we see ERC as a sounding board for administration and council on environmental matters, so that we can bring various strategic decisions, various initiatives, projects that perhaps as administration or even as council that we may be struggling on, and bring that to ERC for input and to provide advice on how to move forward, more strategically speaking. And so in the next slide, I've highlighted some areas that we think ERC might be good at and be able to provide that strategic advice. And obviously, as mentioned, that's open. Those areas are open to discussion based on your personal expertise and what the group as a collective feels that they can provide the most input on. So the areas that we've sort of highlighted initially as areas where we see that ERC could provide good value is through the wildlife management, which we've begun the discussion on today. So if we can broaden our education and understanding on wildlife management issues within the Bow Valley and within Canmore, ERC could then provide advice on community education, program support, and advice to council on how to move those programs forward. Another area that we think that ERC could provide a lot of value is through natural assets. So we have a student currently contracted to do a natural asset inventory or natural asset scope review, which highlights the desire to have a natural asset inventory completed. And so as administration, we need to determine what is the best way to bring that forward to senior management, to council, to incorporate into our asset management inventory. And so there could be conversations with ERC of, in your experience, what's the value of having a natural asset valuation and inventory? How can that be used effectively in decision-making within the town? Are there potential risks of doing a natural asset inventory and valuation that we're not seeing as administration at this point? And so just having a broader conversation around that. The climate adaptation plan. So as Amy mentioned earlier, we do have our climate adaptation plan was completed in 2016. It was technically a 5-year plan that is needed for update. And so there is grant funding available now to do climate adaptation plans from the Municipal Climate Change Action Center. And so we need to determine what is the best way to move forward with an update to the climate adaptation plan. Is it through a broader environmental plan? As you can see, the next point is an environmental sustainability action plan update. Is it through a broader plan where we incorporate mitigation and adaptation together with wildlife management, or should it be updated on its own, or is it incorporating it into the hazard identification risk assessment process that our emergency management teams use? So we could have discussions around that. The SAP, as I mentioned, is up for update. The lower Silvertip wildlife corridor. So we're in the process where we have to begin the development of a wildlife management plan for that corridor. So we have to contract out an RFP to get a consulting firm to help facilitate the discussion with the landowners and build the management plan. And so there's potential that we could have this done under the advice of ERC, where ERC reviews the RFP that we're going to put out, or then helps review various aspects of that process to ensure that we're moving in the right direction for that wildlife corridor. We also see that there's the potential for ERC to support us with the new net zero building code or energy code that's coming out. And how does the town move forward on that? Where's the role of administration? Where is the role of council in encouraging higher levels of government to adopt the code? Or how do we move forward if the code isn't adopted? Having those conversations. And then as a more immediate example, or relevant example to today, is there's a conversation with administration around offering an e-bike incentive. So Banff launched their e-bike incentive recently, and we've had a lot of conversation within the community about Canmore offering a similar incentive. And so we could have discussions at ERC of, do we want to go in the route of an e-bike incentive? Is there another program that funding would be better served for? If you're looking at it from an equity standpoint, is an incentive for an e-bike the best option? And so those are the kind of conversations we think would be really valuable to have with ERC. And that's kind of the direction that administration would like to see the group going, but obviously open to have that conversation with the group. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And that is where we're at in the presentation. So I guess I'll hand it back to you, Bob, if you want to facilitate the conversation. And I'm available to switch back to previous slides if anyone would like.
Sure. I have one question, and this is more out of ignorance than anything else. We have a bylaw and we have a policy, and which is more important, a bylaw or a policy? I like, what trumps who? Does a bylaw trump a policy, or does a policy trump a bylaw, or is there anything like that in those two documents?
Yeah, I can't fully speak. Like, they're both a council. It's a council policy, and the council approves the bylaw as well. So the bylaw here is ERC specific. So it gives the ERC committee their mandate and what your role is as dictated by council. The EIS policy is a policy specific to the EIS process. So it outlines what you need to see in an EIS, what planning's requirements and commitments are within the EIS. And within the EIS policy, it states that administration shall refer at their discretion for review the EIS to ERC and to Alberta Environment. So there's two bodies that they shall review or shall refer an EIS to. So that's the connection to ERC to the EIS policy there.
Yeah. So the question, or I guess the comments that I have regarding that is, one of the changes we had recommended was to align the bylaw with the policy, and right now they do not align it with respect to terms of reference. The terms of reference is the determination of terms of reference for an EIS sits with the ERC in the bylaw, but ERC is not mentioned in the policy. So if you're just strictly looking at the policy, ERC has no input into the actual terms of reference. But overall, we're ending up having to assess the terms of reference without having had any input into the determination of the terms of reference. And I think that's where that's one change that I think we should align the two policies with each other, because right now they don't. There's no consistency there. And that was the main concern that I personally had between the bylaw and the policy. And so that they should be congruent. Right now they're not.
Yeah, and I think my only comment on that is that under the ERC bylaw, it says that ERC shall do in that list of items that I showed you in that first slide. So you're not mandated to do those, you shall do them. And then with the EIS policy, it's at the discretion of the administration to circulate it to ERC for review. And so I don't necessarily think it's a misstep or like an inconsistency. It's just, if the bylaw said you had to review the terms of reference, then I would think it would be a misstep, but it's a shall review. But this is just my like initial not legal opinion.
Yeah.
It actually does say the committee shall review and advise on draft terms of reference. So shall is a must.
Shall is a must.
Shall is a must. It's not a could or should, it's shall. So I think that's where that supports Bob's contention that there is a misalignment, because in the current process and under the current policy, we're not meeting the bylaw for ERC, which says that we shall review the draft terms of reference.
And that makes it difficult for us to get an EIS, and they've assessed the terms of reference, but we're seeing those terms of reference basically for the first time when we're reviewing the document. So we don't, it's almost a blindsiding not a tactic, but it's almost blindsiding the committee by not having an idea of what's in the EIS before we get it, or what's in the terms of reference before we get it.
Okay.
So it's not I don't think it's a big change, but I think that the policy, if ERC is involved in the EIS, then it should be congruent. There should be an alignment between the two policies. And I don't think it was deliberate. I think it was probably one of these things that happened when it was written up, and it just needs to be corrected.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm just pulling it up here again. I lost it. And so that's, you just want, is the main edit then you're looking for, that the Environmental Advisory Review Committee also provide input into the terms of reference, or that you see
correct.
the terms of reference?
I have input. Like I don't think we have to be the total determinators for the terms of reference, because obviously that's also a role of the third party reviewer. But at least to have some input into, we're not saying that we dictate the terms of reference, but having some input into them would certainly not be unreasonable. It doesn't give us veto power or an overarching power, but input into them wouldn't be unreasonable.
I would support that. Just from a council side, like as Bob says, it's not like there's a veto piece over how like ERC itself is a standalone determinant of how the terms of reference are. But I do think having like another set of eyes for our community, and also just giving a heads up towards council, hey, this is where the terms of reference are going, can be also helpful, I think, from a counselor standpoint. Mm-hmm.
And so, sorry,
Sorry.
I just want to follow up on Jeff's comment. Because I'm new, when
I'm new.
The blind leading the blind, is that?
Yeah, exactly. We're not that blind, are we?
Well, I hope not.
No, we're trying our best.
Your comment of ERC providing input or giving council a heads up on what's in the terms of reference. Is there currently, my understanding was that the comments from ERC to council on the EIS was simply through the form that you fill out. Is there a mechanism in place where ERC can provide a heads up to council?
See,
Don't
I've
know.
never been on a council part yet during my 3 months where EIS has been like requisitioned. So I actually don't have any firsthand lived experience on how that goes.
Okay.
Yeah, so sadly I can't provide like, yeah, like
That's
yeah, exactly. I'm just inferring that I think when it comes to like the critical piece of formulating the best EIS possible to get a better set of eyes, say for this group,
Right on.
in terms of references go, was always great. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Mhm. Yeah, but I wish
I
I had
agree.
one for one in real life. Yeah. Like, and just with regards to like the 2 to 3 weeks things, I do feel, and obviously like many people here on this current committee, they were around for the for actually having to go through like the EISs from the Three Sisters one. That, like, I'd like to think that one was a bit of an outlier in terms of its sheer size and magnitude. And I think if this group was like at the table providing input on the terms of reference for like probably the vast majority of most EISs coming down the pipe, that 2 to 3 week time window would not be unreasonable. But obviously, I'd like to hear what you guys think.
Yeah,
on that.
no, I agree, Jeff. I think that we won't see a Three Sisters EIS in that or something of that magnitude in probably our lifetime again. But I think we were asked to turn it all around in 10 days, and it was an 800-page document, and it took a bit of negotiating just to get 4 weeks out of it. A typical EIS like the one we did for South Canmore, like that's not going to take that long. Like it wasn't a huge document, but the expectation that we got the third-party reviewer, they've reviewed 2 or 3 weeks, and then we're the ones that are pushed into the corner to turn it around in a short period of time, is a little unreasonable. So either a set timeline or at least a negotiated timeline with the town, so that we aren't sort of said, "Well, turn this around in 4 days." I can't see that being reasonable, and that's what we were fighting with the Three Sisters.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just trying to understand middle ground piece. So maybe the 60 days is not as something that hopefully we'd have to trigger something to 60 days, but because how much, what's the current time now that is stipulated? Is there something like defined?
I think they were saying in the presentation there that it's not really stipulated, it's negotiated.
Oh, is that right, Caitlin? Because I saw like a 2 to 3 week thing at one point in one of the slides, but like I might have like misinterpreted that.
Yeah, that's sorry, Amy and I had this conversation earlier today to determine if it was stipulated anywhere, and we can't find where it explicitly states how long ERC has currently to do a review. Sounds like that's a bit more of ad hoc based on,
okay,
right. I'm not sure what, I haven't done one yet either. So and then this 2 to 3 weeks was feedback I received from planning, which commented on the typical turnaround for an EIS for a third-party reviewer. And I don't have clarity of whether that's in their contract or not, but.
If you just look at the fact that we meet once a month, 4 weeks would be the maximum. If we got it, at the one meeting, we'd have it ready for the following month. So, or else we could meet earlier if it's important enough. But I can't see it being longer than 4 weeks on a typical turnaround for one of these.
Yeah,
I think the concern, and I think it's a warranted concern as well, is that by stipulating or mandating the time frame that ERC has to review, it's going to get people's backs up, for lack of a better phrase. That it'll raise flags and it'll draw attention to the process, and we don't necessarily want that right now. So I think if we leave it, sorry, Jeff, maybe.
No, sorry. I can understand where you're coming from there, Caitlin. I don't know if you're the one that was at this part, because I guess when you guys here that are on the committee were given the 10 days, who gave you the 10 days? Like that like it's almost like people are being set up to fail there. Like I feel if administration's like reasonable and says like, look, these guys are not going to drag their feet on purpose. They have no intent on that. They're not here to be like a wedge. But saying 10 days on 800 pages, that's that's a little unfair. Like, so I think if admin is willing to like provide something of reasonable time frame for these guys to do their review, I don't know if we need to mandate something hard. I'm just brainstorming.
No, and I agree, because they're all specific to the size of the project, right? And as I say, the South Canmore project, I don't think it took us, what, Glennis, maybe two weeks to look through that.
Yeah, wasn't very long.
Answer that.
Yeah. I was just going to say, if the planning department, because that timing would have come at sort of negotiation with the planning department, because the planning department is on the spot between the proponent and third-party reviewer, and trying to set reasonable time processes. So, I mean, if the procedures in the planning department just recognize that a more complex EIS is going to take some additional time to review, and maybe even contemplate something like, if it's hard and fast that we can't review the EIS until after the third-party review is signed off, perhaps we could start to look at the project description before that, so that we just gain some time without getting into the environmental impacts or mitigation plans, but at least to get our heads around the project description and any background documents. There's nothing to say we couldn't start to look at background documents and in advance of finalizing that third-party review, just if it is a complex EIS that's going to end up in that 800-page neighborhood. So, and that wouldn't have to be in a policy or a bylaw. That's just recognition in planning department procedures.
Yeah, and I guess it's basically saying, don't forget about us in the planning process.
Yeah. We're here.
Yeah. And then I guess a question to like the rest of the committee, it was this sort of thing where, hey, like something needs to be spun out in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, which is not unreasonable. Would we be willing to bump up a meeting ahead to like make that happen? So if, I feel amongst this group, there's such respect for environmental process that, it's the sort of thing, okay, it's 2 weeks or it's 3 weeks, we'll bump a meeting up ahead or have an extra meeting to like help facilitate that process, as opposed to lose the capacity to do what many of these folks signed up to do.
Yeah, I agree, Jeff. I think that's
we can be nimble, right? Yeah,
I think that's very reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another.
We have done that too. So sorry.
I think that's another argument for at least having the opportunity to look at the terms of reference, right? Because as Jeff, as you said, the more eyes, the better, and that minimizes problems at the back end, right? Well, it potentially minimizes problems if you catch the information that's required at the front end, at the terms of reference stage. So,
yeah, if we know if we've had input or know what the terms of reference are, then we're much more prepared to review the document than we are if it's just handed to us at the last as a finished product.
That's a big surprise, eh?
So forgive me for not fully knowing your process yet, but you see, by being able to review the terms of reference in advance, it would set you up better to review the completed EIS.
Correct. Yeah.
And a simple change in the policy document by mentioning ERC as having input into the terms of reference would actually probably solve this problem.
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah.
It would align the documents between the policy and the bylaw as well.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to think of for next steps. That sounds like the other edits that were requested, are we in agreement that we don't need to necessarily incorporate those at this point? They're accurately captured in other tools that the municipality has access to, and that the time frame, the issue around the time frame is something that we could have not in a formalized document, not regulated or stipulated anywhere, but it's more of an understanding of respect between ERC and administration planning.
Yeah.
we can try to navigate that and see how that works over the next few EISs. And if there continues to be an issue, we can revisit that specific conversation. But I think that we can manage that. That seems like a fairly reasonable request. And I think will protect the entire EIS process by doing that. And so the main request, or the only request for edit that still remains, is that we just include ERC in the review of the terms of reference.
Right.
Am I understanding correct?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just one thing on the climate change aspects. The sustainability, the SSR doesn't talk about cumulative impacts at all. I think, Amy, if I'm right in remembering, I don't think it's been revised since I last really got my head stuck into one of the SSRs. But so I do see that there's a gap there. It doesn't necessarily have to be addressed by ERC, but I don't know where the town can address cumulative impacts. The incremental impact of a project on cumulative greenhouse gas emissions.
And to respond to that, Glynis, I think that's a great point. And I think, and I don't think the EIS is like the right place for this, but I think ERC, it's not that ERC isn't the right place for this conversation.
Right.
And so perhaps having that conversation as one of our focus areas, or a focus of a meeting, or however we as a group decide we want to frame these future conversations, and determining like how best to incorporate that. Is that something that we can bring up? And I'm just spitballing in our pre-application review process that maybe Amy and I should focus on more and make sure that we're mentioning that to developers? Or is it just that we have to do more education around it, or whatever it might be, but under the advice from ERC of how best to capture that? Because I take the point that it potentially is missing, and I'll have to go back and review all the documents. I don't have them fully memorized yet, but yeah, sorry.
Could it be done as an edit to the SSR?
Potentially. We'd have to, I
see what planning says about that one.
Yeah. Well, I have to figure out the whole process around the SSR, but there is a potential, like we could have a concentrated, detailed conversation on this at some point to figure out where are some of the gaps, maybe where are things missing, and you could provide that advice to council, that maybe council then directs administration to, hey, this needs to be stronger, or whatever it might be that we have that conversation on. So does that answer your concern, Glenna?
Yeah, I think so. And I guess the other focus area that I didn't see explicitly addressed on the list was follow up around the circular economy discussions, and maybe that comes in the environmental sustainability action plan update or elsewhere. But that's another kind of environmentally related area that this committee could perhaps provide some insight on.
Can I jump in there? I was going to bring it up in the roundtable, but we were kind of running into the next agenda item. So I was like, oh, I'll save it for next time. But I just got the report from the consultants, so I haven't had time to kind of digest it and pull out the stuff from it. But that is one thing that I would love your guys' big brains to help out with, is figuring out the next steps, because their mandate was to kind of help identify some key opportunities and to provide the framing language and rationale for why we'd want to start thinking about the circular economy. But in terms of next steps and what we do with that document is up to us. And I don't have the answers, but I would love to get you guys thinking about that and help me with that struggle of, what is the best kind of path forward for the short term and longer term. And, my immediate thoughts were just to integrate some of that into some of the climate action planning work we're doing, but there's
Right.
more opportunity. So, but yeah, to dedicate some ERC time to circular economy is something that I would love.
Perfect.
Boy, be careful what we wish for, huh?
You'll be busy.
Exactly.
I don't know if on that note, since I feel like we've, unless anyone has any other comments on specifically the edits, I think we've kind of wrapped that up, that most of them are tabled, except for I'll bring back the conversation with planning, because it's planning's EIS policy about incorporating just that one sentence that you had about ERC being involved in the terms of reference review. So I'll report back on that at the next meeting. And then kind of further to what Glynis was bringing up with some areas of focus, is there an area within the group that you feel your previous experience lends itself to provide advice on? I don't know if I'm phrasing that well. Do you feel yourself as an expert in any specific area that we should be bringing issues to you on, that you'd prefer to advise on? Just to kind of focus Amy and I on prioritizing what we bring to you and not just inundating you with something different every day. And
well, I think we've sort of set up ourselves to handle some of these wildlife management issues for the next few meetings. And I think if we just tackle those, and then I think those will take a lot of time in those meetings. So I'm not sure if we want to start stacking, but maybe we can sort of get them in a line that we can maybe, and then prioritize how we handle those. Does that make sense?
Yep. So begin with
Waverly's going to say something, yeah, too.
Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry, Waverly.
Yeah, thank you. I think my little hand here blends into my wall paint. I just, going back to the presentation, Caitlin, I had one question I wanted to ask before we get too far from it. So I know Whitney had mentioned the bit around the traditional ecological knowledge and that the Stony didn't want that included at this time. That makes complete sense if that's what they've asked for. However, I was wondering, she had mentioned that there might be a possibility to circulate development applications and EISs in some way, like through the Indigenous Advisory Committee, I think it is. So I just wanted to clarify how that might happen, just because I think it's not really something that we can necessarily say, like, we're just not going to do anything without a timeline, because we have to recognize that there are rights there, right? It's not just stakeholders, there's Aboriginal and treaty rights.
Okay, I'll have to follow up on that question, Waverly, and get a bit more input from Whitney and what she intended with that comment, and I'll report back at the next meeting, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. And you had asked for areas of expertise, so just while I have the seat here, my background's really in wetlands and environmental policy.
Perfect. Anyone else want to share what an area that they?
I have a background in yoga instruction. It's probably not very helpful.
That's probably super helpful. We can all just calm after.
but like if it comes towards, like, you know, helping get message out and stuff, like I'm totally comfortable helping, like, the rest of, like, the ERC committee, where we're, you know, if it's the sort of thing, like, we actually get faces out there on videos and talking about stuff and promoting things, whether it's like a fruit tree thing or off-leash dogs or EVs or whatever it might be. I'm totally happy to help participate with that sort of stuff and bring, like, you know, bring that content forward, because sometimes I feel these ideas are awesome and they get put forward in a certain way. And if we can put them forward in, like, a more broad reach with, like, different folks and different people within the community, like, sharing these messages, sometimes it helps get it across even more. You kind of hit that tipping point where, like, it's out there so much that everyone understands it.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Perfect. So what I've heard is a focus on wildlife management initially. We have some expertise to can lend to that conversation from the wetland area, and then just primarily a focus on engagement, public awareness around, starting with wildlife management, for example, of how to get those messages out.
Yeah, and your suggested list is certainly, you know, I think it would be of interest to us all. We just don't want to be, as you say, bombarded with a whole bunch of things and then we get nothing done as a result.
And Caitlin, I do also have a background in energy efficiency and greenhouse gas emissions and
Perfect.
that type of area.
Great. I knew we had lots of intelligent brains with lots of expertise and experience. So I wanted to make sure I was understanding fully what we were dealing with or who was in the room so we could focus our conversations. Perfect.
But actually, to prepare for this discussion today, I had a look, just Googling what the mandate is for various municipal environmental advisory committees. And I kind of focused on looking at outside of development where they're what their roles are, and in a lot of cases they don't. In the cases that I found in my quick search with Ms. Google, they don't necessarily expect the advisory committee to have expertise in all areas, but to serve as to facilitate discussion and flow of information and expertise. So in some cases, there might be expertise in the room, but in some cases, there's expertise in recognizing where gaps are and being able to advise on what resources could be used to address those gaps. So I would think that's probably valid for our ERC committee as well.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Thank you. Well, I'm excited. I feel like we're gonna do some cool stuff. But with that, I'm cognizant of the time. So Bob, maybe I'll hand it back over to you. And
Yeah,
I think we could have this conversation all night.
Yeah. Let's move on to new business. And is there any new business? I don't have anything. No? Then we can move on to scheduling the April meeting. Now, I believe there's some restrictions as to when Gareth is available. Is that correct?
Yeah, he indicated that he was only available the 4th and the 11th of April.
Okay.
And Amy and I are both away visiting our families that week. And then I'm traveling to Prince Edward Island, so I'm away for a few Mondays in a row. So the conversation earlier in the meeting was perhaps moving that meeting until May to allow the biosphere a bit more time to gather the information for that wildlife management conversation.
The other option, if it's not a Monday, would a Tuesday work later on in the month? Just throwing it out there.
Tuesdays can be tough for me depending on how hectic council meetings become, because Tuesdays like council days.
Okay.
But if it was like later in the evening, I guess I could like dig it out on a Tuesday night after like at 5 o'clock. Okay. You know, these like, Caitlin's in Prince Edward Island and Amy's going to,
there's Zoom. You guys can call in.
I can call in for sure, but I just want to make sure those guys are good because that's a big trip to head out and you haven't had a chance to go in a while.
I mean, as much as possible, I'd like to keep to our first Monday of the month rather than moving the meetings around, just to accommodate other. That's what I have penciled in on my calendar so far. So I'm kind of holding those spaces unless we need to do something different. So if we aren't available on the 4th of April, then the beginning of May would probably be the next best.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I just don't want to lose any momentum here. We may have to go into July if it's okay with people, but let's just move it to May then, because I think Gareth's presentation is going to be kind of critical.
Yeah, I just want to be respectful. I think May 4th might be a little early.
April 4th.
For him to pull it together.
Yeah.
So to be respectful of him and his time commitment. So are we saying May 2nd?
Okay.
That's sure. The first Monday of May.
Yep.
Same time at the 4 to 6, if that works for everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There's 5 Mondays in May. So if it's the sort of thing where things are looking pressing and you guys wanted to do like a secondary meeting, obviously being respectful where Glennis is coming from as well. but, if the sort of thing that we got some stuff that we want to make some momentum on, and we decide like, hey, like this is the metrics for success that we want to do and some key performance indicators. And if we need to do that to push, whether it's like, these things with fruit trees, etc., I'm happy to help. So just let me know.
Okay. And I've got some, Caitlin, did you get the same documents that Gareth sent me as well?
He mentioned that he sent them to me, and I may have just not come across it yet in my inbox, but
I'll send them. I'll send them to you. Maybe you can circulate them to everyone.
I'll circulate them with the draft minutes once I have them up.
Okay.
And they
Great.
won't be as detailed as last month. So I
You
won't
know,
have
they
to
don't
read
need
all-
to be. They don't need to be.
Oh,
You don't
that's
need to
good.
put that much effort into it.
But I'll try to capture kind of the key points and
Yeah.
and
We can always go back to YouTube if there's any discrepancies.
that's true. We're recorded forever now, so.
And I apologize in advance if I end up not being available for that time. I think I should be, but this is the advantage of Zoom is I will be away for half of that month, but I'm not sure what half.
Perfect. Oh, and I guess on that note, Waverly, thank you for the reminder. Bob, you wanted to have a discussion about in-person versus virtual?
Yeah, we can throw that out. Now that restrictions are coming off, are people comfortable meeting to get, all together, or do we want to continue with Zoom? Just a show of hands, who wants to stay with Zoom?
I can do both. Yeah.
Okay, so what about a combination that works for you to set
would
up?
work. That would work.
We can, I'll try that for sure. And yeah, because then I think if we have it in person, the public can still come in person and we don't have to worry about recording it and broadcasting to YouTube. And then we'll see how we can see how it works, because I do know in the past with the mixed meetings, the people on the screen sometimes get lost in the conversation.
Yeah.
So we can try it and see how it works. And
Yeah, we've never had any public attend our meetings, so.
Yeah, I don't mind attending in person if I'm here. It's just often these kind of start right when I finish work. So it's just a lot easier to join Zoom or if I'm away.
fair enough. Perfect. Well, I will try to find a room that caters to both.
Great.
Yeah, and it's the sort of thing we need to start half an hour later, Waverly, so you can get there for like, I could probably push back 4:30 to 6:30 and then just hustle to the studio right after. So like I can help compromise on that piece too, guys, if it helps get people in person.
Mine's really unpredictable. It depends on what's due that week. So it's okay.
Right.
Don't work around me because it'll likely change.
Yeah, just putting it out there. Okay.
Yeah, thank you though.
Okay, anything else before we go? No?
Oh,
Gotta
very
get
good.
gotta get a motion to adjourn then. Ralph. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you in a month and a bit.
Thanks,
You bet.
everybody. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Take care.
Thanks so much, Caitlin. Thanks so